The Brinksmat robbery was one of the largest robberies in British history, with 26 million worth of gold, bullion, diamonds and cash stolen. It occurred at the Heathrow International Trading Estate in London on the 26th of November 1983, from a warehouse operated by Brinksmat, a former joint venture between US security company Brinks and London-based company Matt Transport. The bullion was the property of Johnson Matthey Bankers Limited. Mickey McAvoy and Brian Robertson were convicted of armed robbery. Most of the gold has never been recovered. Lloyds of London paid out for the losses, and several unalivings have been linked to the case. The Brinksmat robbery happened at 6:40 on the 26th of November 1983, when 6 robbers broke into the Brinksmat warehouse, Unit 7 of the Heathrow International Trading Estate near Heathrow Airport in West London, England. It was described as the crime of the century. The group gained entry to the warehouse from security guard Anthony Black, who was complicit in the robbery. Once inside, they poured petrol over the staff and threatened them with a lit match if they did not reveal the combination numbers to the vault. The robbers thought that they were going to steal around £1 million worth of Spanish pestes, but they also found 3,000 kilograms of pure gold bullion outside the main vault in 152 bars and in 76 cardboard boxes. The gold had been stored at the warehouse overnight before being due to be transferred to Hong Kong the next day. In addition, they stole platinum, 1,000 carats of diamonds, and £250,000 of travellers' cheques. The total value of their haul was $26 million, equivalent to $111 million in 2023. 2 days after the robbery, a couple saw a white-hot crucible operating in the garden hut at a neighbour's property near Bath, Somerset. Suspecting it to be linked to the bullion robbery, they immediately informed the police. The police arrived and they were shown the hut, but they said it was just beyond their jurisdiction and stated that they would pass the information on to the police responsible for that area. The couple were never asked to give a statement to police nor give evidence in court. No explanation has been given for the police's failure to follow up immediately on the tip-off. Police soon identified that Black's sister was living with Brian Robinson, who appeared in the Flying Squad intelligence files. Black confessed in December 1983 to aiding and abetting the raiders, providing them with impressions of the key to the main door and giving them details of security measures, and became an informer. He identified his brother-in-law, Brian Robinson, as one of the robbers. 10 days after the robbery, Robinson and Mickey McAvoy were arrested. Anthony Black was also arrested for the robbery but was later acquitted. In January 1985, the premises in Bath were raided and the furnace was found, but the occupier, John Palmer, a jeweller and bullion dealer, was on holiday in Tenerife. His former partners, Garth Chappell and Terence Path, were arrested. The sudden movement of $13 million through the Bristol area branches of Barclays Bank allegedly came to the notice of Bank of England, which informed the police, although the Bank of England denied this. McAvoy had entrusted part of his share to associates Brian Perry and George Francis. Perry recruited Kenneth Noy, who was an expert in this field, to dispose of the gold. Noy melted down the bullion and recast it for sale, mixing in copper coins to disguise the source. Noy was placed under police surveillance. In January 1985, he encountered undercover Detective Constable John Fordham, dressed in camouflage and a balaclava. In the grounds of his home, he stabbed him 10 times, resulting in the detective's death. Noy claimed that he'd been attacked and killed Fordham in self-defence, and at the resulting trial, the jury found him not guilty of murder. Brian Reeder was also at the property at the time and put on trial for murder, but was acquitted. In 1986, 7 men, including Noy, Reeder, Chappell and Patch, were put on trial for handling the stolen gold, with Noy accused of masterminding and controlling the operation to launder the robbery proceeds. Palmer was deported to Britain from Brazil in 1986 and was put on trial in 1987. In court, Palmer said that he was unaware the gold was linked to the robbery and he was cleared of all charges. Another suspect, John Fleming, was held in Miami in 1986 after being deported from Costa Rica, where he had arrived following an earlier ejection from Spain. He was subsequently deported from the US to the UK in 1987 and charged with handling £840,000. Despite a 3-year attempt to question him, his case was thrown out of court after just 25 seconds due to insufficient evidence. In 1988, 9 people, including Perry, solicitor Michael Relton, and McAvoy's wife, Kathleen, were arrested and put on trial for conspiracy to handle stolen goods. Relton was accused of bringing £7.5 million smuggled to Switzerland and Liechtenstein back to the UK to invest in London's property boom in the Docklands. A 10th person, property developer Gordon Parry, was also considered a co-conspirator but initially escaped arrest. The jury failed to reach a verdict for Parry, who faced a retrial. Parry was arrested in Spain in 1989 and returned to the UK a year later and charged with handling over $16 million. He went on trial with, among others, Perry McAvoy's first wife Jacqueline, Patrick Clark and Jean Savage in 1991. Perry was accused of laundering £7.5 million, Clark and his son £4.5 million, and Savage £2.5 million. McAvoy's former wife was alleged to have benefited from a house her ex-husband bought her. The jury failed to reach a verdict for McAvoy, but her house was seized. Anthony Black was sentenced to 6 years for robbery. Mickey McAvoy, Brian Robertson were tried at the Old Bailey in December 1984. McAvoy and Robertson were sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for armed robbery. McAvoy and Robertson were released from prison in 2000. In 1986, Noy was found guilty of conspiracy to handle the Brinksmat gold, fined £500,000 plus £200,000 cost, and sentenced to 14 years in prison. He served 7 years before being released in 1994. Chappell was jailed for 10 years for conspiracy to handle stolen goods and fined £200,000, and Reeder jailed for 8 years. All three men were also convicted of fraudulently conspiring to evade VAT payments. Constantino was convicted of VAT fraud but acquitted of conspiring to handle stolen goods. He was given 12 months suspended jail sentence. In July 1988, Michael Relton was convicted of helping launder proceeds and jailed for 12 years. Kathleen McAvoy was convicted of conspiring to handle stolen goods but given an 18-month suspended jail sentence. In August 1992, Gordon Parry, Brian Perry, Patrick Clark and Jean Savage were convicted at the Old Bailey. Parry was jailed for 10 years, Perry for 9 years, Clark for 6 and Savage for 5 years. A few months after leaving prison in 2001, Perry was shot dead. Attempts by McAvoy to strike a deal to give back his share of the money in exchange for a reduced sentence failed. Since then, the money vanished. Despite a record reward of £2 million offered for locating the gold, much of the 3 tons of stolen gold has never been recovered. £1 million of gold was found stored at the Bank of England. In 1996, about half of the gold, the portion which had been melted and recast, was thought to have found its way back to the legitimate gold market, including the reserves of the true owners, Johnson Matthey. According to the BBC, some have claimed that anyone wearing gold jewellery bought in the UK after 1983 is probably wearing Brinksmat. The rest of the gold was believed to have been buried. Lloyd's of London made a record insurance payout of £26 million. By 1995, 57 people had assets frozen, including homes and a Kansas oil well, and insurers had recovered £16 million, including £3 million from Noy. In January 1995, the High Court ordered McAvoy to make a payment of £27,448,229, making him responsible for the entire sum stolen. Despite being acquitted of robbery, in 1995, White was also ordered by the High Court to repay the stolen £26 million plus £2.2 million in compensation, and his wife ordered to repay £1.1 million. The judge said that he was satisfied that White was involved in planning the robbery. By 2004, £25 million had been recovered in total. On the 21st of December 1983, less than 4 weeks after the robbery, police in Austria arrested 5 men, 4 Italians and an Austrian at a Vienna hotel. Police also recovered 10 billion bars bearing the refiner's mark and the serial numbers of the bars stolen in the Brinksmat robbery. According to the police spokesman, the bars were gold-coated tungsten counterfeits and therefore could not be Johnston Matthey's stolen gold bars. He said that the arrested men planned to fraudulently claim that they were from the Heathrow robbery. No explanation was given as to how the counterfeits obtained the unpublished bar serial numbers, nor the likely benefit of counterfeiting stolen property in this way. On the 30th of September 1984, less than a year after the Brinksmat robbery, the banking and gold trading arm of Johnson Matthey Bankers Limited, collapsed and was taken over by the Bank of England to protect the integrity of the London gold markets. Losses amounted to over $300 million. The bank had made very large loans to fraudsters and insolvent businesses over several years and had serious unexplained gaps in its records. The fraud squad was called in to investigate the bank and certain customers. The so-called Curse of Brinksmat or Curse of the Brinksmat Millions refers to the shooting unalivings of several men who were allegedly involved. These unalivings were thought by members of the London criminal underworld to be related to laundering of the gold. In 1990, the former treasurer of the Great Robbery, Charlie Wilson, had moved to Marbella, Spain, where he was suspected of being involved in smuggling. Engaged to launder some of the proceeds from the Brinksmat robbery, he lost the investors $3 million. On the 23rd of April 1990, Wilson was unalived. Nick Whitting, an old-school friend of Noy, who was questioned on laundering, was found unalived after being shot twice and stabbed in 1990. John Urquhart was one of the launderers of the proceeds of the robbery. He was unalived in January 1993 on Marylebone High Street in central London. Kenneth Regan assisted police with the information about Urquhart's unaliving. Graham West was subsequently jailed for Urquhart's unaliving, and was his accomplice Geoffrey Heath, who planned the unaliving. In 1996, Keith Headley, a suspected money launderer whose home was searched during the investigation, was unalived on his yacht in the Mediterranean Sea. On the 5th of December 1998, Hatton Garden jeweller Solly Nahome was unalived outside his home. Nahome was a financier and associate of the Adams family, who were also suspected of having been involved in the laundering of Brinksmat gold. Prior to his unaliving, Nahome's associate and jeweller, Gilbert Winter, had disappeared from the home that he shared with his girlfriend on the 9th of March 1998. It was thought that Nahome and Winter were unalived over the disappearance of £800,000 from a deal, while it was suspected that the rival gang unalived Nahome and Winter to cause disruption. In November 2001, Brian Perry was shot 3 times in the head in Deptford. On the 14th of May 2003, George Francis was unalived by John Flynn outside Francis's courier business in Bedminster. Francis was a former associate of the Crays, who were also believed to have been involved in the laundering of the gold. Francis had survived an attempt on his life when he was shot in the shoulder over the bar of the Henry VIII in Hever, which he ran in May 1985. After allegedly failing to pay £100,000 to have a jury acquit Lenny Teddy Bear Watkins, who was on trial for unaliving Peter Bennett, a customs investigator who was shot by Watkins in a struggle. On the 24th of June 2015, John Goldfinger Palmer was shot dead.